This is some mess, huh? It's actually how a lot of marketers feel today, bound by challenges so complex, so interconnected, they feel like they're tied in knots. They can't seem to move their brand or their careers. It's what many call a Gordian knot. A Gordian knot, if there ever was one. And perhaps you know that term. It's from an ancient legend about a seemingly intractable problem. The lesson for how a Gordian knot was actually addressed is helpful to marketers today who want to jumpstart their brand's growth, either because they have a stalled brand that needs revitalizing, or because they have a new brand or a new product they need to launch, and they just cannot afford to not be successful. Well, that tangle marketers are in today is caused by a set of complex things that are all interrelated. First, there's media strategy and mix. Today, we all know it goes beyond media, as we've long considered it, to all kinds of consumer touch points, many of which cannot yet be measured, may never be measurable for ROI. Yet before most marketers will undertake a media plan or touch point plan, they sort of want reassurance of those metrics that return. So that sort of stalls them and creates a knot. On top of this, it's not just the explosion of touch points, cable channels or websites or mobile apps or events, online games, shopper marketing, e-commerce sites, all those things that make it difficult to sort out a touch point strategy are also changing the times, places, and moments of truth where consumers make decisions. And thus they're affecting all the other critical elements that flow from the mix strategy. Things like what constitutes a big idea that can jumpstart engagement across the mix? If you have a different agency for each element of the mix, a digital agency, a traditional agency, an event agency, a PR agency, well, how do you configure, align, and manage multiple agencies to execute on strategy? That's a pretty big part of the knot. We also know that what a brand stands for, ideally that a meaningful role it plays in the target's lives, that sort of mental subconscious space that makes it relevant and different from alternatives, well, that needs to be integrated across the touch points and across the agencies, and that's not an easy thing to do. And we also know that while you're sitting around with all those agencies at the client table, you know, they will probably see the solution not as a holistic one, but in terms of their own specialty. A social media agency will see the client's problem as a social media problem, a social media solution that they can provide. A digital agency will probably not see channel issues, maybe just digital solutions. These are things that require a lot of time and effort for the marketer to coordinate and supervise and coach and counsel. Meanwhile, the agencies are perhaps eyeing the budgets the other agency next to them has and wants them for themselves. So again, it just makes the knot more tangled and more complex. A marketer can sort of feel the knots forming and tightening, the stress points. And you have to imagine a marketer is wondering how to untangle the knot. Where do you begin? Well, actually, making the problem all the more wicked is new longitudinal research on what actually does make a brand grow. It reveals the fallacy of many long-held ideals to which strategy and media mix and big ideas have long been devoted. The idea that 80% of your revenues come from 20% of your customers. Or the efficacy of trial, that putting money into trial will really give you a really good return. Or the value of targeting so-called brand loyalists. A lot of these things are now called into question based on some really terrific research. In other words, if so many of the rules of thumb, long giving marketers direction, are now suspect, rules of thumb that long informed their internal team, their agencies, provided rationale for their strategy when selling a plan up to a boss or a board, well, that's a pretty big mess to be in, and what's a marketer to do? Well, that's where the lesson of the Gordian knot is instructive. For the solution of how to address a Gordian knot was actually not to expect it to be untangled at all, but rather the solution is why the story of the Gordian knot has survived for thousands of years.